I'm Dr. Harold Wong, and today I want to cover the third in a series of articles on how to not get scammed as an investor. This article was published February 1st, 2012 in the Arizona Republic. And the topic or title of the article is How Emotions Can Affect Investors' Decisions. So let's cover the most dangerous emotion that affects your decisions. It's when greed takes over. This is the basis of virtually every scam, whether it be the Arizona Baptist real estate scam, whether it be Charles Keating, the Lincoln Savings and Loan scam. That was during the savings and loan scam and a crisis about 25 years ago in the middle 1980s. You see, thousands of investors were promised a higher rate of return than they could get in any other financial institution. This was what Charles Keating did, the head of Lincoln Savings and Loan. And then when the real estate market crashed, partly due to the fault of the 1986 Tax Reform Act, guess what? Then the real estate wasn't worth much, he couldn't pay the rates of return, and it all collapsed. Lincoln Savings and Loan was the largest savings and loan bailout during the 1980s, when virtually all 3,000 savings and loans, the whole industry went out of business. And I want to stress, the heads of these savings and loans, they weren't all crooks. It wasn't like Charles Keating, even though he was made the poster boy and got a 10-year criminal sentence. Most of them were honest. The savings and loan industry had served America well. But guess what? Federal interference in this market caused the whole industry to go out. So we're talking about greed. And the most recent example is Bernie Madoff. For over 20 years, he promised a higher rate of return than you could get in the bank, in bonds, treasury bonds, or interest-bearing instruments. And amazingly, he never had a down quarter. It was consistent. So right there, it was too good to be true. So again, greed is the number one thing you have to guard for. Second thing is the issue of people can't admit when they've made a mistake or just it's the wrong time in the wrong market. So the second danger is when you can't bear to take a loss. Let me give you an example of this. In the real estate market, during the real estate bubble, fed by liar loans and easy credit, what happened? We reached a peak of housing prices at the end of 2005 or spring of 2006. In Arizona, the peak or median price got to about $263,000 or $267,000. And then 5 years later, it had dropped by over half. Whole states like California, Arizona, Nevada, and Florida, the average price or the median price of houses dropped by half. But here's what happened. Someone who bought it at the peak, and let's say they paid $270,000. Then the market started slipping, and this is an investment home, not a personal home that where you're going to live in for a long term. And then they couldn't admit. They said the market's dropped 10%. I can't take that loss. Plus there's another 6 to 10% in real estate commissions, title fees, spruce up fees, and closing costs. I'm just going to wait until the market comes back. And then the market drops 20%, 30%. And then they ride it all the way down, and 5 years later, that $270,000 house is now worth maybe $135,000 or less. And then now they're in a position where they're praying. They say, well, I'm stuck here. And they still won't admit their loss. Because to admit that you have a loss means you're admitting something went wrong or you made a bad decision. Let's give you another example where fear paralyzes any rational thought. The stock market, measured by the Dow Jones, reached its peak on October 9, 2007. The index was 14,164. It hit its low on March 6, 2009, where the Dow Jones index was 6443, or lost 54% of its value. What we saw from hundreds of investors that have attended my seminar since the 2008 crash is the same behavior. When their portfolio started dropping, let's say you had $1 million at the peak of the market in October 2007, Then the portfolio dropped 10% to 900,000. And you say that's not that bad. It dropped 20% and now you've got 800,000. And then you call your stockbroker or financial advisor, financial planner. And in almost all cases, people have told me their financial planner, stockbroker, or financial advisor said, just ride it out for the long run. Guess what? Then it drops 30%. Now you've got 700,000. Then they ride it all the way down and they've got 500,000. So they lost half of their life savings. At this point, they're just praying. They're saying, please, 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 if my money would just get back to where it is, I'll get out. But do you know the answer is they're lying to themselves and their friends and their family. And let me give you an analogy. Let's suppose you go on one of those gambling trips that are so popular from senior communities where you get the low price bus ride and you go to Las Vegas. And let's say the bus gets there Friday at 3 p.m. Takes an hour to check in your room, and one of your neighbors brought $1,000. That's his gambling money. And then an hour later, he had bad luck, whether it's a blackjack or slot machines, and he's lost half of it. He's down to $500. You know what he says at this time? He says, if my money can just get back to where it was, $1,000, I'm going to quit and cash in my chips. It almost never happens. Let's say another hour goes by. Maybe it's 6 p.m. on Friday and he's got back to the $1,000. He doesn't cash in his chips because now he's saying, my mojo's gone, I got the right rhythm for the craps, throwing the dice, I've got a lucky slot machine, I'm going to make a lot of money. Guess what happens when you got to get on the bus at 3 p.m. on Sunday and go back to your community? He's lost all of his $1,000. It's all gone. Because he's not going to cash out at 6 p.m. on Friday when he had $1,000 that dropped down to 500, now it's back to 1,000. He's not going to cash out and just hang out at the buffet or go see the free lounge act for the next 2 days. And so these are the three emotions or situations that can really lose you money as an investor. In contrast, Warren Buffett, his rule number one is never lose money. Rule number two, don't forget rule number one. And rule number three, go back and study rule number one, which is never lose money. And maybe that's why Warren Buffett is the greatest self-made stock investor. And over the last 20 years, he's been ranked in certain years the wealthiest self-made man in the world. Because he understands rule number one should be never lose money and not be bound by the emotions that affect most investors. For more information, go to my blog site, drwonginvestorguide.com.